Okay, so 9.6, the second part. We mentioned all of these steps before when factoring a trinomial when a is greater than 1. The first step is always to factor out the GCF. In the previous video lesson, we did not do that because there wasn't any GCFs or greatest common factors. So in the second part of the notes, there is. So when we look at these examples, they're all going to have a greatest common factor taken out, and we did in 9.2 part 2 we did a lesson on that. So we're going to go ahead and list all of the prime factorizations of each one of these to take out a GCF. If you get comfortable with this, if you got good at it from the previous section, you'll notice that it's 2, but I'm going to go ahead and do the long way of every problem. But if you are comfortable with taking some shortcuts at this point, go ahead and do that. So I'm going to list out all of my terms and then the prime factorization of each term. So 2 is a prime number, and we have 2 v's. 12, we have 2 and 6, 2 and 3. So 2, 2, 3, and then a v. And 10, when we break that down, we have 2 and 5. So if you can see, what's in common in all 3 of these is we have a 2 in each one. So we are going to take out the 2, then inside we're going to have what's left over. So we have a v squared, that's those 2. Then we're going to put the minus in, and then 2 times 3 is 6 and a v, so minus 6v. Then we have a plus 5, so plus 5. Alright, so now that we have the greatest common factor, if you notice in this problem, the v, or the a, is still 1. So we're just going to factor that portion. So we can do v and v. Then our our factors of 5 are just 1 and 5. So we have 1 and 5, or we have a negative 1 and a negative 5, because a negative times a negative is a positive. So which of these add to equal negative 6? We got the negative 1 and negative 5. And then bring down that 2 from the problem, and this is your final answer. So when you take out a GCF and this is remaining as a 1, you don't have to do the other steps. It's just factor the problem and you're good. Alright, let's look at the next example. We are going to write out the take out a greatest common factor. And here's a hint. If they're all even, for sure you know that there's going to be a greatest common factor because at least 2 can come out of each one. So we have 4y squared, 14y, and a 6. So this would be 2 times 2 and 2 y's. 14, when we break down 14, if you have to do your factor tree, go ahead and do that. That's going to be 2 times 7. 2 and 7 are both prime numbers. And then we have a 6, which is a 2 times 3. I'm skipping the factor tree for each one, but if you need to do that, go ahead and do that. So we can see in here we have a 2 as our GCF. So I'm going to write that out. The 2 on the outside, and then on the inside we have 2 and 2y's, so 2y squared plus 7y plus, and what's left over here is a 3. So now I'm going to take just this inside portion. So we're going to just focus on that and factor that portion. All right, at the end of the problem, after we come up with our 2 parentheses for this, we're going to bring that 2 and put it on the outside. But for right now, let's just kind of ignore it. So now I'm going to go through my steps that we did on the previous section. So I'm going to do my a times c and then rewrite it with a as 1. So I'm going to write y squared plus 7y plus 6, because 2 times 3 is 6, and I'm going to make this a 1. Now I can go ahead, and I'm going to work up here because I have more room. I'm going to put my double parenthesis, and then I have my y, and my factors of 6, I have 1 and 6, 2 and 3, and that's it. So which one of these, and again, because it's positive, they could be both negatives, but because this is positive, I'm going to stick with all positives. So which ones of these add up to 7? positive 1 and a positive 6, so we do that. Plus 1 plus 6. Now your next step here is to divide by your original a. So we were factoring this problem, not this one because we already took a GCF. So our original a is going to be a 2. So I'm going to divide these by 2. All right. Now I'm going to reduce the fractions, and I'm taking an extra step here. So this would be y plus 1/2. That's already reduced. And here we have y plus, and then 6 divided by 2 is 3, so we have a whole number. So now if you remember, when we have our fractions reduced, now we take the denominator and put it out here and leave the numerator by itself. So we would have 2y plus 1, y plus 3, that remains the same. And then maybe back here when we took out the greatest common factor, we're going to put that out front. So our factored version of 4y squared plus 14y plus 6 is 2, and then 2y plus 1 times y plus 3. If you multiply all this back out, you're going to get your original answer. Go ahead and pause these and try this next one if you can. I'm going to go right ahead and do it. So I'm going to find what my GCF is. So we have 18x squared, 12x, and 6. So 18, I'm going to work over here. So if I do 18, I have 2 and 9, 3 and 3. So this would be 2, 3, a 3, and 2 x's. You know, some of these there might be an x to the 4th, x squared, x. So you will be taking out x's as your GCF like we did in previous ones. But for these, there's not any that are showing up like that. So 12, if we break down 12, we have 2 and 6, 2 and 3, and then 3 is a prime number, so we just have 2, 2, and 3, and an x. And we break down 6, we have 2 and 3. All right, so I'm going to clean this up a little bit and get my eraser to work. There we go. So what I'm going to do now is take out my greatest common factor of this one. If you notice here, we have a 2 in each one, but we also have a 3 in each one. So 2 times 3 is 6. So I'm taking out a 6, and I'm going to rewrite my insides now. So what's left out of, after I take a 6 out of an 18, what's left? We have a 3 and then 2 x's, so 3x squared. I'm going to put these minuses back in there, so minus. What's left after I take a 6 out of a 12? 2, and then the x. And what's left here? Well, when everything's circled out, we're just going to put a 1, because basically a 6 divided by 6 is 1. So now I have a that is greater than 1, so I'm going to go back to my slide and divide method, so 3 times 1. So I'm going to rewrite, remember, I'm going to put this 6 in the final answer of the problem. So I'm going to write x squared minus 2x minus 3. I'm going to factor that. X and x. My factors are 3 to negative 3. Remember, when it's a negative, it has to be a positive and a negative. Because a negative times a negative is a positive times a positive is a positive. So if the answer is negative, it has to be one of each. If we have 1 and 3, where either the 1 is negative or the 3, but not both. So which one of these come out to equal negative 2? It's the 1 and the negative 3 when we add those together. So a positive 1, negative 3. Now I divide by my original a that I did my slide and divide by. So I'm going to divide by 3, each of these. I'm going to reduce the fractions. This one's already reduced, so I'm going to take the shortcut of my final answer. So since this is reduced, I'm putting the 3 with the x. So this becomes 3x plus 1. And over here, 3 divided by 3 is 1, so I'm just going to write x minus 1. And then we're going to bring down that 6 on the outside. All right, these are a little more involved because of this first step with taking out the GCF, but once you do that, you're basically just factoring this inside like we did on the previous notes section.